All right, with the nonsense out of the way, I can now officially welcome Julian onto the show. Hello, Julian.
Hello, mate. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. As I mentioned, I'm tired, I'm old, but I'm invigorated by Arsenal's European campaign,
That's
and
good.
I'm excited to talk about it. And I think the first thing I have to ask you, though, obviously you have loyalty to both of these clubs.
Yeah.
Emotionally, where are you right now in terms of being pulled in either direction?
It's a great question, and I don't want to bore people straight away, but to try to make it
It's my job.
interesting. I know, but I moved to London in January '04, so 21 years ago now. When I was 23, so soon I would have lived as long in London than I did in Paris, which I never thought. I never thought I would leave Paris. To be fair, and obviously for the 23 years I was in Paris, PSG was my club, my family's club, my life, anything you want. And obviously, when I moved over here, Arsenal became my club because I was a Londoner now. There was all those French players. Obviously, even with the Lawrence family now, the ties with the club are very strong. Gali Clichy was my best man. So there's so many things that obviously make me a die-hard Arsenal fan too. And in a way, the best me and the children always hope for is a PSG game somewhere. I think we played in the Champions League maybe in 2017 or 2016. My dad came from Paris to take our oldest one to the game at the Emirates, and they were in the home end with the home fans. Obviously, could not really celebrate the 2-2, but still. And the children have been to PSG's games and to Arsenal games a lot, all of that, and it's both the best draw possible, obviously, and the worst draw possible, because I think I've suffered so much with PSG in the Champions League, as you know, as you can imagine, through the years, the remontada, the final loss, everything in the last few years, that I've been so ingrained really with PSG on the Champions League scene. And I want obviously PSG to win it one day. I want Arsenal to win it almost as badly. So I don't know. I guess the heart will always be a bit more PSG because it's where I was born and etc. But the heart is very much split between PSG and Arsenal too right now. And I said to the kids, at least we will have one of the two family clubs in the final. This is great. And it's probably better to not have them both in the final, because I think that would be even worse in a way, strangely. So I don't know. When we played in October, our little girl, the youngest one, when we left the house the morning of the game, she said, "Listen, guys, all I want is a draw tonight, okay? And there can't be a draw this time round. Obviously, there has to be a winner. So we will see. But I think it's a tough one, really."
Yeah, there can't be a draw as well, because I want to survive to my next birthday, and if this goes to penalties, I simply will
That's
not.
true.
So
I know. I hear you.
I want to ask you something specific about this iteration of PSG, though. I mean, and you'll forgive me for saying this. Look, I lived in Paris in 1996. I can say, though, I did not connect to PSG at that time, so
fair enough.
Apologies if it makes you feel that I hadn't connected to Arsenal at that time either. But I think of the PSG project over the last many years as quite soulless. And I'm sorry for saying that if it's offensive, but that's how I connect to it. This feels like a very different era and a different approach. And I have to admit that were Arsenal not in the competition, I think I'd be taken with this group, a young group, an exciting group to watch. They play scintillating football. And it feels like, gosh, what could have been at PSG had they just taken this approach in the past? So I wonder if you see this as a big divergence. I don't want to pretend they haven't spent money, by the way. There's some expensively acquired and handsomely paid players in the squad. But is this a refreshing reboot? And how much more connected as a result do you feel to this group at PSG?
I think refreshing is the perfect word, really, that you use. And for so many years, I almost fought from a certain point with English journalists, for example, or even people who would say, PSG are a plastic club, they're a young club, they don't have that much history, and now the Qatari have splashed all that money, kind of this bling bling policy, and this is not really a football club or football team. And I had to fight against that a lot and to show that there are proper PSG fans, that PSG existed before the Qatari, all of that. But even when Zlatan Ibrahimovic would say something like, before us, before Qatar, there was nothing here. This hurt the club really, and hurt the history of the club, and hurt like fans from a long time ago and all that kind of things. And now, funnily enough, now walking the street, Elliot, and people that walk past me say hello, and the first thing they say is, "Oh, I finally love this PSG team." for all the years we have had people saying like, this is not a real team or a real club, and you've just splashed money to add individual talents all over. This is not a proper team. Now I've got people who say like, this is an amazing team. I love watching this team. I relate to this team. I identify to this team. All of that, non-PSG fans. Yeah. So it's been an incredible journey when you think about it since the summer. I think there was always going to be a time where they stopped that kind of spending the money on marquee signing and big names because it didn't make sense in the end and didn't work certainly, and go for something more organic in a way. And you're right, it's still a lot of money spent on Joao Neves, for example, but Joao Neves is so much more likable really than Neymar, for example, just to name two players.
Yeah.
And for us as fans, of course, it's much better. The atmosphere has never been as good. The football has never been as good. The season has never been as good, to be fair. But also for people from the outside who are not PSG fan, who have been looking at this club for the last 15 years or so, the progress or the regression, whatever way you want to look at it. It's great to have finally that kind of really positive from you, the question that you asked. But I remember at halftime of the Liverpool game away at Anfield, where we go down from the stand to go into the kind of media lounge, really. And I have people that I've never, or the journalists that I don't really know, coming to me and said, "Oh my God, I love this team. I love Dembele. I love Vitinha. I love X. I love Y." And if I won't lie, it feels really good.
We'll get into the tactics and the naughty, gritty football stuff in a moment, but I want to just stay on this sort of theme for a minute, but fast forward into the season. Obviously, we played PSG. We beat PSG. I was looking at it. It was by far the lowest XG PSG have this whole season, despite them having 64% possession at the Emirates. And I have theories on why I think it's a very different team now. The addition of Kvaratskhelia, the integration of young players like Doué and Joao Neves, obviously, who need time to adapt. Ousmane Dembele going to center forward. I don't want to steal your thunder here, but that's some stuff that we've put forward. Do you think that really covers it, or how would you explain the evolution of what this team was at that time and where they are now, and whether there are things about that game that are relevant, or if it's almost as if it was a different club at that time?
For me, the only thing relevant about the game in October was the set piece, because Bukayo scores on a set piece, and this is where PSG are vulnerable, and that's where Arsenal are very good. So
we still do that.
Yeah. And later, when we talk more about the analysis, as you said, the nitty gritty of the tactics and stuff, this is one of the points really where the game could be won or lost for the two teams. Apart from that, for me, there's no point talking. I said it last night on ESPN. There's no point talking about October really, because Arsenal are pretty much the same. Kai Havertz and Thomas Partey in the first leg, but this is it. Whereas PSG are just night and day, like literally one extreme to the other, where they are now compared to where they were in October. This is year one of this Luis Enrique project, because this is very much his project. He didn't want Neymar anymore, got rid of him. Didn't want Verratti anymore, got rid of him. Got the exact players that he wanted. Doué is his. Lewis-Skelly that they wanted in the summer could only come in January. That's his. Joao Neves is his. Pacho is his. So this is very much year one. Year one of any project. The Guardiola project at City, year one, didn't win anything. It was a blank season. I'm not going to remind you of Arteta year one's project, but we were both there. It was not easy. Club year one at Liverpool in his project, starting in 8th, finishing 8th. So the year one, rarely, unless you're Arne Slot, as we've seen this season to our detriment, good, but he's an exception. But apart from that, there's always.
I'd also argue that's not year one per se, but I don't want to get into.
But you're right. He inherited a squad that was a hell of a squad too.
Yeah.
So I think year one was always going to be a little stutter at the start, naturally, to find. I said it on English television before the game against Aston Villa. It's a massive jigsaw. Any football team is a jigsaw. Whatever level you play, grassroots level, semi-pro level, pro level, and top of the top. It's all a jigsaw. You and I, as coaches together, we will try to find those pieces for the jigsaw. And sometimes you think that this one goes in this corner. I think, oh no, this one goes in this corner. But we will need a bit of time to figure out exactly what piece fits where. Right? And it's the same for Luis Enrique. It was always going to take a bit of time. That game in October came week 2, I think. Week 2 or week 3 of the Champions League. This was super early in a season where PSG had been a really slow starter. They've had players like Doué who were at the Olympics, for example. You had others who had just arrived that window. So we said the summer window, Neves, Pacho, those kind of guys. You had players coming back from injury. So there was a lot of things to to just, I think, get together, work out, figure out what to do. And it's true that at the beginning they were not playing great football. They were at times playing really good football, could not score for their lives. There were other times where the football was not that good. There was quite a lot of criticism back home in France about Luis Enrique and the fact that he kept changing the starting lineup all the time. Yeah, he seems to be always a 4-3-3, but kept changing players, even sometimes of a midfielder going forward, a forward going into midfield. It was a bit of a mess, and sometimes we could not really work out what he was trying to do. And he kept saying, "Don't worry, we very soon we will be better. We will get better." And for a long time, we could not really see much of that progression. And probably mid-December, I would say, this is when he finally clicked. The game against City in the Champions League, of course, which was huge at some point in January. There was the game against Lyon, the game against Monaco in the league in December that were massive. And from then on, it just clicked. And you're right, there's a few factors. Dembele going to number 9, that changed the whole picture. That midfield of Ruiz, Neves, and Vitinha offering the balance, the physicality, the intensity, the energy, incredible midfield. And then Doué, Barcola, Lewis-Skelly had then taken it to another level, really. So City in December, Liverpool in January, and in between, really, so December and January, those 2 games against City and Liverpool, the Monaco game, the Lille game, the Lyon game, were games where we felt finally they're getting somewhere.
Interesting. By the way, you mentioned them. I'm still disgusted with Lyon for what they did at Old Trafford, denying me what would have been a very funny night. So
yeah, of course.
Thanks for nothing. Well, okay. So a few of the things tactically that I think about when I think about PSG, I think about attacking talent all over the pitch, and I think about pace, incredible pace. And a big part of that is the fullbacks, Hakimi and Mendes, who are sensational. And we saw the devastation they can bring to the opposition at Villa Park and in that tie in general. But I think it is an interesting one in terms of how much do you let your fullbacks attack? How much do you let them push up against Arsenal? And the interesting thing about Arsenal's season, and maybe Arsenal's last couple of seasons under Mikel, is we've been brilliant in the big games. It's the small teams that bunker and stay compact that have actually caused us so many challenges. So PSG want the ball. They want to be up the pitch. They want the fullbacks up the pitch. And I'm wondering, let's start with the fullbacks. Do you think Hakimi and Mendes will be given that free rein that we've seen them have to such devastation? Or is Luis Enrique going to have to rethink their role a little bit for this tie?
I don't think they're going to change anything. I think it'll be the same. Hakimi is the one that's always had a little bit more license to go forward because Marquinhos and Pacho just covered that, Marquinhos especially, but covered that side. Mendes, for a long time earlier in the season, was the third centre-back in possession, which was strange because of everything you would not have from him going forward.
So brilliant attack.
Yeah, that has changed probably around the end of November when Luis Enrique thought, okay, I would rather maybe be a bit more exposed defensively, but have his input going forward than almost restraining him at times, because it was really that. It was Marquinhos, Pacho, and then Nuno Mendes there. And that's been a bit of a change. The key for Nuno Mendes especially is Fabian Ruiz, because Ruiz will be the guy who just mops behind and covers and does that kind of work when Nuno Mendes goes forwards. But the two are, for me, I said it the other day again on Match of the Day on the BBC, they're the best two fullbacks. Yeah, you could look at Timber and Lewis-Skelly being very good, but Miles is still very young, really. You could look at Di Marco and Dumfries maybe for Inter. You could look at Koundé and Bale. There's a lot of right back, left back combination that you could look at and say, okay, yeah, this is very good. I think Hakimi and Mendes, for me, are just slightly a step ahead of everybody else. They tuck inside when they have to and come inside against Villa on the second goal, the one that Mendes scores. They're the front two. They're the two centre forwards, literally, on that counter attack, because they've come inside and left the width to Dembele on the right, which is a bit unusual, and Barcola on the left, which is more usual. But sometimes they are the one that keep the width, and the two wingers come inside a bit. They're certainly never on the same kind of line, if you want, when you divide the pitch by 5. They're either in the half space or wide. They're just super intelligent to start with. They've got incredible physical ability, the pace. If they make a mistake, they usually recover it defensively because of how quick they are. And then the way they get on with whoever is their winger, Lewis-Skelly, Barcola, or Doué, usually, sometimes Dembele, it's just great understanding and great partnership too. So we saw defensively, especially against Liverpool, and how well they did Mendes against Salah, maybe even more than Hakimi against Luis Diaz. And again, one of the keys of the game would be Mendes against Bukayo, Martinelli against Hakimi, and in the U-turn, Timber against Kvaratskhelia probably, and then I would think Lewis-Skelly against Doué on the other side.
Yeah, those matchups are just mouthwatering if you're a neutral, but who's a neutral? This is where I think Timber, to your point, I don't necessarily disagree with how you rank the fullbacks, but I think from a purely defensive standpoint, I don't know if anyone's playing better than Timber terms of 1v1 defending
definitely.
right now. And to do it coming off an ACL injury and play as much as he has is really incredible.
Yeah, I agree.
One little thing, and this may be me just being glass half full, I think potentially Merino having to drop back and be the 8 in this first leg with Rice a little bit deeper. I think because PSG push on and will have the ball more than most teams who play Arsenal, I think Merino might just be a little quicker and more instinctive with how he releases the ball to play guys in behind and to make that next pass to release a runner. Not that Rice isn't good at it, but I think Merino's even just that bit quicker. That was really what he did at Sociedad. He's not a high volume passer, very low percentage. I mentioned this on our main pod, but he played 13 passes against Ipswich in a game where we completed over 760 passes, right? But the passes he did complete, they were first time set players away. Obviously, he sent Martinelli away for the winner at the Bernabeu.
Yeah, Saka,
so do you think that's going to be go ahead.
The Saka chance against Ipswich, that's his ball, on the edge of the box, that then Bukayo misses it. So yeah, no, I agree with you.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if you think what your thoughts are from through a PSG lens of Trossard playing 9, Merino coming into midfield, and Rice having to drop back, and how that might be an advantage in terms of PSG maybe being able to control the ball more, but maybe create some vulnerabilities going the other direction.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting point that you're making. Not that Trossard runs in behind a lot, but he can do it. But you certainly would have the diagonal runs from Martinelli, especially not Bukayo doesn't run so much like that. He can run in behind, but not so much diagonally like the goal we saw Martinelli score at the Bernabeu, like you said. I think the battle in midfield, and we saw Vitinha struggling in that second half, especially at Villa Park, would be there. I think Partey is a massive, massive miss for Arsenal, really. Yeah. I just loved how he's been playing the last 2 months or 3 months even. But Mikel Merino can do a really good job there. He reminds me sometimes of Fabian Ruiz a little bit, because he's not the quickest, of course. He's quite strong and quite solid and quite tall, but not the most mobile maybe. But if you have mobility around you, which is the case for Partey and certainly Rice and Odegaard, same for Vitinha and Neves, then it's maybe not too much of a problem, because you bring a lot of balance, and that's what you need, really. That's the other thing that you can do. So this is a huge battle. Odegaard, Rice, Merino against Vitinha, Neves and Ruiz. PSG will go and go, I think, especially certainly in the second leg. The first leg, it will depend. They might be a little bit more cautious, but usually they go man-to-man. For example, when Arsenal have a goal kick, they will go man-to-man. So somebody will go really high with on Merino, on Rice, on Trossard. One of the centre backs is going to follow another of the midfielders. So it should be really, really interesting to see how press resistant this midfield can be against the PSG midfield from an Arsenal point of view. But yeah, PSG, I think, will have to be very, very cautious about the running behind that some Arsenal, because they will play a defensive highline, especially at home. Again, at the Emirates, it might be more of a medium block, and then there will be less of that risk.
That's what I'm curious to see in terms of just how high that defensive line is. I mean, I'm repeating myself at this point, but I think Arsenal have dealt with that very effectively recently. It's the low blocks that have caused the problems. I think there's a fascinating midfield battle here, Julian, between philosophies. And I want to be careful not to downplay Arsenal's technical level, but especially with Partey out, I think the edge technically goes to the PSG midfield. I think João Neves, Vitinha, and Fabian Ruiz is a more technical midfield. But the running power and physicality and engine of the Arsenal midfield, I don't think PSG compete there. Yeah. And I'm wondering how you see that, because PSG will press. They will try to take the ball off you. I mean, taking the ball off Declan Rice, he may not be the progressive passer and the elusive player that Partey is, but he can run by you. He can bounce off you and run past you. So what do you think of that sort of really interesting dynamic between an extremely technical midfield versus the running power and range and physicality of the Arsenal midfield?
I think it's a great contrast, great battle. I've always thought this PSG midfield lacked physicality to go super far in the Champions League. I always felt it from the start of the season. And then, to be fair, they proved me wrong, because it shows that the intensity that you can put and the energy with the ball, not even just without the ball. So let's just focus on the ball when PSG have the ball, is almost mesmerizing in a sense, that there can be so many variation within that midfield, plus the wingers that come inside, especially Doué, especially Dembele, who drops. That is so hard, I think, to defend against and to even cope with all the movements within that midfield, all the permutations and all that rotation. And Arsenal will be the more physical. You're right. The team that maybe run the most. I'm not sure run the most, because I think I've looked at the amount of kilometers run by both teams, and is very similar so far this season in the Champions League. Certainly PSG are running far more than they ever ran before in previous regime and previous teams. So they would be interesting, but there's a point where Arsenal could run a lot behind the ball and not have much of it, especially at the Parc des Princes. And when Arsenal have the ball and show that power really on the ball, not so much in the first leg, unfortunately, that's where the party suspension is a massive blow, because Declan Rice as a 6 can't run with the ball at all from there. It's not possible. And to be fair, had Jorginho been fit, I would have put Jorginho as a 6 to keep Rice as an 8 and Merino as the 9, instead of going Trossard 9, Merino 8 and Rice 6. Really, because I think one thing that can hurt PSG is Rice running with the ball, and you can't do that in that first leg. And that's at the Emirates, and that's where you could get an edge before the second leg, and that, I think, kind of level ups a little bit that battle in midfield, I think. But for the second leg, it would be the key. How can PSG, stop Declan Rice? The Declan Rice, the level of the Declan Rice during the 2 games against Real Madrid. Okay, Real Madrid are not very good. Certainly in midfield, he had a lot of freedom, which won't be exactly the case against PSG. But still, he's more powerful than any of those PSG midfielders. So stopping Declan Rice in the second leg would be the key for me, and I'm not really sure how they do that.
Well, you talk about not being able to run from a certain position. I think one player who has shown that he's willing to run from deep, or at least try to step past a man and progress the ball, is Miles Lewis-Skelly, and the personality he plays with and courage is incredible, allied with obviously tremendous talent and technical quality. But he has been a bit of a target for teams trying to either wind him up or take the ball off him. And while 99% of the time I think he handles it brilliantly, there can be a giveaway. And that's a space that obviously if you give that away and all of a sudden Doué and Dembele are running at you, it can be scary. So do you think that PSG might try to get Arsenal to give it to Miles Lewis-Skelly in those zones, and he might be a pressing trigger because also you get it off him, then you're running at Kivior instead of Saliba as well. So is that going to be the strategy? Try to target Miles Lewis-Skelly and see how he holds up against pressure?
I think they're going to welcome him stepping into midfield for sure. And then, but at this level, semi-final, if your tactical plan, if you're Mikel Arteta, is to get Miles to play in midfield and to come inside like he's really good at, as you said, from a midfield, as a midfielder himself, that's why he's so good at it. Then PSG will wait for him there. I would even probably think, from a Luis Enrique point of view, they will even let that pass open from Kivior or Raya to Lewis-Skelly, and then they will pounce or try to pounce.
Trap him,
and then we see, and then try to trap him, and then see what happens, see how press resistant he can be. Again, defensively, I don't think they have a target that way, for example, where I think they try to isolate the 2 wingers anywhere, or the 2 wide players to go 1v1, whether it's on the right, on the left, maybe sometimes more centrally. I don't think there would be a let's go at Lewis-Skelly all the time and give the ball to whoever is the right winger for PSG in that game all the time. But yeah, you're right. Certainly on the ball, in possession for Arsenal, I think they could potentially have that kind of trap on Lewis-Skelly and see, because he's 18, because he's never played at this level before, because we saw that sometimes he's maybe even too confident on the ball, and certainly defensively at times he makes mistakes against PSV Eindhoven, against Liverpool at home, for example. Which is normal. He's learning. He's so young, and this is again not his position. So there might be something there to exploit from a PSG point of view.
It's the classic conundrum, right? Like if you only always do the safe thing, you don't win a lot of football matches.
Absolutely.
Someone has to be willing to do the thing that pulls players out of position, and he is willing to do it and does it at a high level. If it goes wrong, you're exposed. It may be the one area where having Rice in the 6 is a slight help in that his recovery, should there be losses of possession to the PSG press, is far superior to Partey's recovery. So that could be helpful. I think that's just going to be a fascinating part of the game, and I'm really excited to see it. I think I want to get into set piece stuff a little bit as well, but before we do that, in terms of the PSG front line, I just want to double check with you. Do you think it'll be Kvaratskhelia, Dembele, and Doué, or does Barcola have a chance to start? How do you see that?
I don't know. I think there's obviously 4-4-3 position. I mean, not really 4 because Dembele is a guarantee starter. So it's Kvaratskhelia, Barcola, or Doué for the 2 winger positions. So Kvaratskhelia started the 2 Liverpool game, the 2 Villa games. What we saw with Kvaratskhelia though is against Villa, especially in the second leg on the right-hand side, it's just not the same. It's not the same bearings for him. He's so used to playing on the left-hand side as a right footer. Then on the right, he struggles a little bit more. So I would say he will start on the left-hand side. And then on the right, Barcola has been great this season, amazing talent, but more of a into space winger. So in behind, he likes the ball at feet, and then he runs at you with the ball. He's so quick, so skillful, all of that. But still, if there's a run in behind to make, if there's space in behind your defense, he loves that. The goal against Liverpool at Anfield, for example, is very much that, into space. Whereas Doué likes the ball into feet all the time, pretty much. He's a Neymar type of winger, not a Barcola type of winger. So it depends really where Luis Enrique wants to go. Against Villa away at Villa Park, he chose Barcola ahead of Doué because he knew there would be a lot of space because Villa had to attack. And the first goal comes from a lot of space for Barcola, running at it on that left-hand side, crosses the ball towards Dembele, then Hakimi scores. So that made sense from that point of view. But then at the Parc des Princes, Barcola was on the bench, Doué started, and Doué was brilliant, that curler that he scores, but everything, because they knew that Villa would play quite deep, or certainly deeper. We didn't think it was as deep as that, but we knew they would play low block, quite deep. And for that, tight spaces, small spaces, Doué is so good, he's a Neymar region. So it depends how Luis Enrique thinks Arsenal will play. I don't think Arsenal will play a super low block and super deep against PSG in the first leg, certainly. Maybe at the Parc des Princes if there's a lead to defend and things like that. But so I don't know. But Doué is in such an incredible form right now. And I think Doué has more of an X factor right now than Barcola. So I would go Doué on the right-hand side, which he doesn't mind. Right, left for him. He comes inside a lot anyway. So whereas Barcola prefers the left, Kvaratskhelia prefers the left. So I go Kvaratskhelia left, Dembele center, and Doué right.
I think that sounds like, what I would expect. And it's why Martinelli has such an important role in this team, by the way, right? Because he works so hard off the ball to come back and help protect that flank. And I think he's going to be an essential part of doing that. Yeah. I think if I had a fear of losing Thomas Partey, like the thing that impressed me so much, both with Miles Lewis-Skelly and Thomas Partey against Real Madrid, was receiving the ball between players and just being willing to turn and face and play the next pass forward, not wall pass back to the defense or straight out to the flank. Their willingness to turn on the ball, good close control, good half turn, and progress the ball. And I think against Madrid, we played inside their block more than we usually do. When Arsenal aren't playing well, we just take what's available outside the block. And I think that's one thing with Rice that a trap we could fall into losing Thomas Partey, but we'll just have to see about that. I mean, the thing that I will say is when you look at the Villa second leg, Emery chose a very big team. He had Onana in there, right? He had Morgan Rogers out, not even in midfield, so we could get an extra big body in midfield. And I don't know that PSG handled the running power and the size very well.
And the physicality,
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. You mentioned set pieces. Let's talk Donnarumma for a second. I think he's looked great recently. I think he's somewhat polarizing. I don't think he's always been embraced by PSG supporters, but it seems like he's rounding into pretty good form. How do you see him claiming crosses, handling set pieces? His form's good now, but does he give you some worries or not at all?
This is not his thing. Crosses, set piece, this is not his thing. And it's fine. I mean...
Well, it's fine for us.
Yeah, it's fine for you. No, but in a way, it's fine in the sense that everybody has weaknesses. Every player has somewhere something that he's not very good at, or even at that incredible level, or we said not very good at. He's still better than you and I on crosses, and he's like really tall.
Mate, I'm like 4 feet tall.
I know, I'm not that much taller than you anyway. Yeah. But yeah, he's not very good at it. I think Luis Enrique said for a long time they didn't work on set pieces, defensively or offensively. They've been doing a little bit more because they've conceded goals. There was a moment between maybe November and February where it was not too bad. Maybe because on defensive set pieces, the other teams were maybe not that great. I don't know. But then there were a few panic moments against Villa in the second leg and even a little bit in the first leg. They were certainly against Liverpool because there's a big save that Donnarumma makes on the Luis Diaz header, I think, either on the second phase or on first phase on set pieces. Even against Dunkerque from the second division in the French Cup semi-final, we concede 2 goals on set pieces. Poor from the keeper, poor defending, poor marking from Pacho. So, yeah, this is it. And I know Arsenal haven't been as strong as they were earlier in the season, maybe on the set piece, ole ole, etc., all the goals that Gabriel used to provide, or even William. It's maybe not as lethal as it used to be, but it's a massive worry for me and for PSG, really. So I guess the best way to stop Arsenal from set pieces threat is not give away wide free kicks or corners. And they did that really well at the Parc des Princes against Villa, for example. They were really worried about Villa set pieces. And Villa had 1 corner in that first game because they play so deep. And I think had 2, maybe one free kick from the halfway line that they played almost like a corner, and 1 wide that, again, they played. But there was not enough from them to be a threat like that. The second leg was different, and I think it would be the same for that game. So they will try not to give anything away around the box and on corners to prevent from being in that situation. But yeah, it is one of their probably their biggest weakness right now. I would say the weakness point that they have is on set pieces, and they won't fix it between now and the first leg or the second leg anyway. So they'll have to go with it.
It's been my favorite segment so far. Yeah, I mean, it sounds encouraging. I actually, look, you want my random prediction? I think before this season ends, not necessarily in the Champions League, but in some game, Declan Rice is going to score an Olympico because he's just putting that ball right under the bar. It's incredible, his delivery. But it does make me wonder a little bit. I think corners could be very dangerous for us, but very dangerous to us. What do you think about PSG potentially finding space to run into countering from corners as a weapon? Because I don't think they're going to have a lot of open pitch to run into. But if I had to be honest, in the first leg against Real Madrid, even though I think we outplayed them, when Vinny and Mbappe were running at us, it was pretty scary. And there was obviously the one moment Mbappe got in, and I was surprised he didn't finish it candidly. Yeah. And the pace that PSG has is electrifying. You have the players to play early and quick to release them. So do you think, as dangerous as corners could be for us to score, do you see that as not a rare opportunity where PSG might try to set something up to counter and escape?
I think it could be. It's interesting. It could be, although PSG have never really done that this season.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I would need to double check the stats, but a goal in transition after an opposition corner, for example, I don't think so. I might be wrong, and people can correct me or us on social media, but I don't think it happened. You've seen fast counter-attacking, fast transition. Yeah, of course they can do that. The second goal against Villa comes from Villa being in the PSG box, and I think Marquinhos almost making a foul of Vitinha, losing the ball, but then in 4 passes, PSG scored. So one of the reasons I think that we don't see what Liverpool are the best in the world at doing, for example, on opposition corners, is that Donnarumma, as we've just said, is not good on crosses. So he would never claim the corner, claim the cross, and play quickly on Barcola, Lewis-Skelly or Dembele, like Alisson does, straight to Salah or straight to Diaz or straight to Jota or Szoboszlai or somebody like that. That we don't do. That PSG don't do. So it would be interesting, but there will be moments in the game where the PSG front 3 or front 4 will run at the Arsenal defense without a doubt.
Scary.
I don't think it will be on corners or wide free kicks, but it would be where the ball is recovered by PSG on the edge of the box, and then they go straight away. And they have this incredible the Dembele goal away at Liverpool. Nuno Mendes on the left, one pass to Dembele. Dembele drops deeper. Nobody from the 2 centre backs, Konate or Van Dijk, had followed him. Turns around, plays the ball to Barcola. Barcola crosses again, and then I say in 4 passes they scored on field from their own 6-yard box. Yeah. So this is what, and we said Villa, same goal, pretty much. This is what they're very good at, and Arsenal will have to be very good. And the rest defense for both teams, really, because I think Arsenal can hurt PSG a lot rest defense will be, again, one of the keys. We had the key of set pieces, the key in that midfield battle. We said the two different styles, the more physicality against the more technical ability, maybe. But then the rest defense for both teams will be one of the other keys.
Yeah, and this is where I think we have to decide whether to stick or twist with our press. I don't like when Arsenal abandon the press, but obviously that's a risk-reward strategy. How are PSG from playing out from the back? Marquinhos, I think is pretty good with the ball at his feet, but Pacho, I'm not as familiar with his game, if I'm honest, or Donnarumma with the ball at his feet. Like, I think we have to maintain our press to stay competitive in this game. I don't think we can just sit back in a mid block and get pushed back. So, and I don't think we will, by the way. So what do you think of that? Arsenal's press versus PSG playing out from the back?
I think, and the other way around as well. PSG are the team that presses the best in the Champions League with the second or highest most recoveries in the final thirds. Arsenal are not far behind in terms of numbers. To be fair, the numbers are quite fascinating to watch. It's very similar. And again, another key. This is the fourth one that we mentioned. This is there. Who is going to be the most press resistant? I think the key from a PSG point of view would be Vitinha. And we saw, and we said already, second half against Villa Park, where he wobbled a bit under pressure, a lot of physicality from the Villa midfield. If he was not in the game, then I think PSG as a whole struggles a little bit. They struggle in the build-up. They struggle to cope with the pressure and the press. And they struggle to find the wingers and Dembele in the right environment or the right position, really, or with the right space. So going at Vitinha and Neves to a certain extent, but especially Vitinha, is probably the key here. The build-up phase really has worked pretty well, I would say. The 2-3-5 is quite interesting because PSG can sometimes play long, and I would not put it past them to play a bit longer at the Emirates, certainly. So Ruiz gets almost into a number 9 position, like we saw against Marseille. Marseille tried to press really high at the Parc des Princes, and Donnarumma played long on Ruiz. Ruiz laid the ball to Kvaratskhelia in behind for Dembele, and it was 1-0, and then the game was over. In 3 passes. And that was the high press, and it was beaten by a kind of a longish ball, really, towards Ruiz. So that's something that Arsenal can do, and that's something that PSG can do. And I think that's something Arsenal can do with Merino as a 9, not Trossard as a 9. But again, Merino, even if Merino starts as an 8 on, let's say, a goal kick from Raya, he can go into the Trossard position. Trossard drops a little bit, and you play long on Merino, and you win the second ball, and that takes you to the Saka goal at the Bernabeu, really. So long ball on Merino flicks it, Bukayo gets it back, etc., etc. So this is another key, and I think both teams could play long at some point. But in the build-up, they build up in a kind of a similar way, although differently because PSG don't have Nuno Mendes coming into midfield like Lewis-Skelly does. It's still quite in the shape of it. It's quite similar, to be fair. And it would be how much can you find Dembele, who drops deeper, to beat that press and release a bit of the pressure? How much you can do that with Trossard, or do you go wide, or certainly Odegaard? I think Odegaard, for me, holds a lot of the key too of this whole game, defensively, offensively for Arsenal. If he can create a lot, if he can go back to his best, if he can trigger the press at the right moment because he's the one that triggers the press for Arsenal and everybody follows, it would be the key. But from a PSG point of view, they will hope that Odegaard doesn't have 2 great nights.
Yeah, I think Odegaard deserves credit for his courage to be available to receive the ball, to progress the ball, to always be an option to pass to. It's easy to take for granted his off-the-ball work and his ball progression when the final third stuff isn't happening, but you're in the Champions League semifinal. You need to do the final third stuff
and
too.
Ruiz would be on his back there's no doubt. Ruiz will just look after him the whole game.
That'll be an interesting battle to watch. So I want to start to get you out of here with just a couple quick questions. I mean, one thing is Arsenal have not faced real intense pressing much lately. Very few teams do it to us in the Premier League anymore. And in the Champions League, obviously PSV couldn't do it. Real Madrid are just not that intense at pressing. In fact, the one time, Raya gave a bit of a lumpy pass to Saliba, that's the one goal we concede over 180 minutes. We're going to have to be much sharper and ready that when we receive the ball, there's going to be players snapping at us. It struck me as incredible at the Emirates how Lewis-Skelly and Partey would get the ball against Real Madrid and just be able to turn and look and face and pick. They are not going to have time to do that. And if Mikel is doing anything in training, he's got to be snapping at ankles. People should have bruises on their ankles to the extent, without knocking anybody out of the game, understanding they will not have time. I think it's interesting, though, because we play Palace tomorrow as we record this. Then we don't play over the weekend. PSG, favorable scheduling, obviously, from Ligue 1. I believe they have Friday game in the league. I'm not saying that this is a huge factor, but they are trying to go invincible this season. Do you think they'll take that game on Friday seriously and put anybody, so to speak, at risk, play a pretty strong lineup? What's your expectation about how that could play a factor?
Yeah, we will see. It's interesting because they chose not to play between the two Villa games and had that game postponed, which they are playing tonight on Tuesday night, as you said, as we record in an hour or so, away at Nantes. Then they are home on Friday, as you said, against Nice. Nice were a good team. They're fighting to finish top five, maybe even top four for the Champions League. So it won't be an easy game. But what Luis Enrique has been really good at lately is managing minutes for everybody. So the ones who started at the weekend on Saturday won't start tonight, or some of them. And then you could expect kind of similar rotation on Friday. But then the strongest team will be for sure on the pitch on Tuesday. It was interesting, I thought, that they decided to play this game against Nice because they could have had that game postponed on Friday night again. But they wanted to play that game, maybe because they just know that. So they wanted to play that game, and the one in between the two Arsenal games will be played as well. So the following weekend, which I can't remember who they play against.
They just want to stay sharp, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this time, because I think they expect that pressing battle much more than against Villa, for example. They really expect it in that game. So maybe at the Emirates, as we said earlier, not the super high press that we see at the Parc des Princes, where literally it's man on man, every goal kick, every time Raya will have the ball, they would go plays on Saliba and Kivio, and then the fullbacks would be high, the midfield would be high, the two centre-backs would be really high for PSG. At the Emirates, I expect something a little bit more like a medium block, really, where you go when the trigger is there. So when Saliba receives the ball with his back to the game, for example, or when the first touch is not great, then they all go. But there might be a little bit more time, I expect, for Kivio and Saliba and Raya. As soon as the ball goes to Rice or Lewis-Skelly or Odegaard or Merino, then they will be on it. That's for sure, because that's this team is about intensity and energy. There's no doubt.
It's fascinating. I said this on another episode, but I'm just curious if you agree with this. Mikel Arteta responded to an embarrassment at the Etihad a couple seasons ago, I think, by building his team to be a team that could beat Manchester City. And I think he did that effectively. You know, he brought in Declan Rice. I think Merino was meant to be a part of that. I think he wanted to be stronger in midfield, have more running power, not be able to get pressed off the ball, be press resistant, but also be physically stronger in the duels. And we know that's so important to Mikel. In a way, I think PSG do a lot of the things that City do and try to hurt you in similar ways. And I'm wondering if you think being built to try to be a City-beating team could be the reason we could be a problem for PSG, and that this is exactly what Mikel has built his team to be capable of handling.
The only difference I would say is there's much more verticality in the PSG team. We've said already a lot on the show, 3 passes, 4 passes, they score a goal. City have never scored on 4 passes. City are still very now, and now that's why they struggle so much this season. And even in the past, it was very much controlling the tempo, making those passes intricate, slow possession, and then we would hit when we find the space somewhere. Then we would go and we would hit you. This PSG team are really, and I believe that I'm not trying to be too PSG biased or anything, but they've got so much variation in the way they play. They can keep the ball for a long period of times, and they can hit you literally in 4 passes. And I think this is the difficulty here. This is what Liverpool struggled so much. This is what Villa, certainly in Paris, struggled so much. And I guess the first half at Villa Park. And that's where Arsenal will have to be very smart, is when do you make a game of it in terms of physicality? When do you want, but you can't go too much because you leave a little bit too much space and then they go at you, and again, that verticality will hit you. So it's really, really interesting what Mikel will have to do tactically to counter that. And it's the same for Luis Enrique, because I think PSG haven't played really a team as strong physically and can almost match the same degree of energy and intensity than Arsenal. Really. Bayern away, maybe a little bit. And even then, it was not a great Bayern team. And as we've seen, they haven't been, okay, they will be champions, but they're not that great. And in the Champions League, it was not that great either. So really, this is the first time. And they had a bit of flavor of that when they went to the Emirates in October, being a much worse team than they are now. They saw the intensity. They saw they were outplayed, outrun, out everything. So they expect that big battle that we've mentioned, physically and tactically. So we see how the two managers respond. But I think Arteta and Luis Enrique are two of the best in the world.
Yeah.
And they will have another plan somewhere that you and I haven't thought of right now, maybe, that could make the difference at some point.
Fascinating. What a battle it's going to be tactically, talent-wise. I think the midfield is everything. Running power versus technical quality. It's going to be so interesting. Obviously, set pieces. Do you have a prediction for? How about a prediction for the first leg? I won't make you pick the tie because that's not fair. But what about just for the first leg?
I said the other day. I mean, there are games like that in the Champions League semi-final, quarterfinals, even maybe last 16, where there's not much of a match, or there's one team that is playing really good and the other team is not able to compete, not at their best or whatever. And we saw that a bit in the Real Madrid Arsenal tie. In the end, it was great from an Arsenal point of view. Of course, it was two great performances, but a little bit underwhelming because Madrid was so average, really, or Arsenal made them look average or make them play average. I think this tie, really, I expect the two teams for the two games to be at their best and give us two amazing games. And I don't think there will be much into it at all. It's not a 5-1 on aggregate. It's not a 4-2 on aggregate. It will be a tight one because I think there's not much in between the two teams, whether you prefer the technical ability or the physical side of it. Maybe a team slightly more experienced than the other one. It depends, really. But there's not much in it at all. So I would think Arsenal have enough at home at the Emirates, even without Partey, to certainly not lose that first leg and probably get a narrow win. So I'll go maybe 2-1 Arsenal in the first leg. 1-1 or 2-1, I think.
Yeah, I would take a win. A draw would leave me very nervous. Look,
but you see what I mean? There could be a game where after you think, oh man, we've got so many regrets. If only we'd played a bit better or played at our level, we would have that kind of regret. I think after this tie, whoever is the losing side would say, you know what, this was two great teams. We got beaten by a better team. There was not much in it, a few details there and there, but really not any regrets because it was two outstanding teams, two outstanding games.
I think that's exactly right. My hope is that PSG is just too young for this to be their year, and that Arsenal have gone through just enough heartbreak and maturity that this can be their year. The thing I do like about our game model, I think we can win in different phases of play, right? We can win with a low block. We can win with a high press. We can win on set pieces. Does PSG have the versatility? You've said they do. I'm curious to see it. I really want to thank you. I'll say this. When it's all said and done, at the end of this tie, you're going to be heartbroken, but you're also going to have a team in the final.
Exactly.
So maybe you lose either way, but you win either way. And Absolutely. I'm envious of you on the latter point. Julian, you're a true gentleman, brilliant stuff. People are going to absolutely love this. And I just can't thank you enough. And I hope to see you in May when I'm over in London.
Yes, definitely, man. Anytime. Thank you.
All right. Cheers.